Hello and welcome back to Wavelengths. It's still a show about video game news, and I am still Brendon Bigley. Today, Legendary Pictures announced that they acquired the rights to make a Street Fighter movie, and as soon as I saw that news, I knew there was really only one person I needed to talk to about it. So coming up next is a chat I had with Tamoor Hussain. I'm here with my friend Tamoor Hussain, who is in England with maybe the best recording setup I've seen in my whole life.
Oh, I almost broke it there. I forgot to bring the stand for my Elgato Wave mic, and so I've taken the mechanism out of a what is this, a tube of hand sanitizer, and taped the mic to the top of it. So it is the most scuffed setup you ever seen. Yeah. And I'm also using my laptop camera, even though I have an Elgato face cam. But if I switch to the Elgato face cam, you will see my younger brother sleeping on the couch behind me.
Oh, well, we don't want to wake him up. So
he's
won't
awake.
Get too
He's
excited.
He's just laying there on TikTok.
Oh, okay. That rules. Yeah, I feel like so much of my life has been just telling people who want to get into making podcasts or making things on the internet, just use whatever you have available and just start making stuff. And that's the best thing you can do is as long as you start and keep going, you'll be fine. Just figure out the tech later. And I feel like you are really just kind of taking that ethos to a whole new level.
The ironic thing is that I'm 20 years into my career and I'm still doing it.
No, I think it's great. However you can make it happen. First of all, congratulations on being at the BAFTAs. That was pretty tight.
Thank you so much. It was dope.
Yeah. Second of all, the reason I hit you up literally mere minutes ago to talk to you was I saw some news that Legendary, the film company, the film studio, has acquired the rights to make a Street Fighter movie, and I saw you tweet about it, and you hit them up, you added them, you said, hit me up to talk about this movie. I want to work on it. So I just want to get your feeling about it, because I feel like we're in this really interesting era. I don't know how you feel about the Last of Us HBO show, but now that is out in the world, it kind of feels like we're in this moment where I think a lot of people are going to start greenlighting video game adaptations and take them seriously. Seems to be the energy. But is that what you want from Street Fighter? I guess is the question.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I put that tweet out kind of as a joke, but kind of as hey, if somehow someone who's got sway sees this and is like, hey, do you just want to read the script and maybe even, because I recently met someone who actually who has done that stuff where people have reached out to them and was like, oh yeah, can you make sure that this video game adaptation feels good and isn't embarrassing? And I've always offered my services to people that are making video games to cringe check their scripts, because I read a lot, I play a lot of games where it's got cringe dialogue in it, and I'm like, hey man, I will do it for free. I will tell you whether this is cringe or not. So
I'll tell you how people talk.
Yeah, I put it out there as kind of a joke, but also a little bit serious. If anyone is at Legendary does want to, I'll do it for free, just because I love Street Fighter that much, and I'll do it. So yeah, I think the tricky thing is, adaptation-wise, we're in an age where I think what's happened is people have figured out how to better pick stories from the world of video games that work as movies or can be turned into movies. I think, for example, Mario is an easy one because it's got so much going for it. Removed from a game, it's got every ingredient that you need to make a good DreamWorks Pixar style movie, right?
Totally.
It's got all
the world
essentials.
is totally laid out.
Yeah, the world is laid out. The characters are simple, but charismatic and relatable in very, very, storytelling ways. You've got the Mario, you've got the Bowser, you've got the, goofy brother, inept brother, and you've got various other characters. And they're able to play with it a little more to, make it a little more interesting for viewers of different ages. So Mario works. And then Last of Us is just a great story. It was built to be that kind of adaptation. It was perfectly made for it. So the work done to it is meaningful to get it on HBO, and they've clearly done a lot of interesting things with it. But fundamentally, it's in a good place. And then Tetris is another one that's been getting a lot of good reviews. That's not about Tetris itself. If it was a movie about T blocks be trying to connect and get into like a perfect line, that would be shite. It's instead the story of Alexei Pajitnov and the history of Tetris. It's more in the mold of like Social Network or the WeWork movie. The story behind this amazing thing. Street Fighter is interesting because it doesn't neatly fit into any of those. Like I imagine the story that they're going for by acquiring the license isn't the story of how Street Fighter as a game was developed. It could be. I would love to see the story of how Street Fighter resulted and created a coin shortage in America because it was so popular. And that's a fact that happened. That would be a really interesting story, the history of how it kind of changed the way we play video games. But that's probably not what they're going to tell. They want to tell the story of Ryu and Ken out on the road beating the shit out of people. And to do that, it's going to be quite difficult. I think the other tricky part is, it's been mentioned, is live action. Live action fighting games being moved over to it really have struggled in the past because you can't make characters look exactly like they do in Street Fighter, because then they look like low-rent cosplay on a big screen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't deviate to the point where, you've got the Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li movie where, the characters look nothing like they do. So it's really hard to find that middle ground. I think that where the challenge that they face is that how do you represent Street Fighter in a way that it feels authentic, both on a visual standpoint and in a narrative standpoint. And I think they could do it. Like there's movies that are out there now where, stuff like The Raid and various other Ip Man martial art movies that are available out there, that they understand what they've done really well is the heart of combat stories. And I think that's really important. That's something that Street Fighter could do really well, because if you focus on a character as opposed to the world of Street Fighter, I think they've got a much better chance for it. I feel like if I was given the opportunity to tell the story of Street Fighter, it would focus on Ryu and his, it's a story that has been told many times before, but Ryu is not only the basic, Street Fighter character, like the blank palette, but he's got so many connections into other stories, like his relationship with Ken and how they're like two sides of the same coin, but also very different from each other. Ken's brash and he comes from, money, and he channels that into his fighting style. But then he's humbled by this man who lives a life of simplicity, and he's shown that through his life, he can attain a level of strength that Ken is unable to attain. But at the same time, Ryu deals with this ongoing kind of, this demon, this very real demon, which is, the brother of his master, Goki or Akuma, who's like killed his master and sees a demon inside of Ryu that he wants to bring out for his own selfish purposes, because his whole goal is to have a fight that no one else can give him. And there's this interesting like push and pull struggle between him and those characters that I feel like that has been done. The Alpha series movies, animated movies, are that basically.
Right.
But what they could do is like set that against the backdrop of something like the Street Fighter animated movie, which was like, these like weird cyborgs are out there. They are looking for fighters of really cool or really high like power, and they're just grabbing them and trying to take them for the nefarious means of Shadow Lu and M. Bison. And I feel like those against each other, if done right, could be this good kind of mixture of the fantastical elements of Street Fighter, but grounded through the real human and like character-driven stories that are why people fall in love with our franchise. It's called the World Warriors. It was called the World Warriors because the focus is on the characters. They are everything to this franchise. And I feel like the challenge of how you balance that is going to be something that I hope Legendary puts the time and effort into figuring out. And if they need some help, I'll happily do it.
Yeah, so, okay, first of all, that's an amazing pitch just by itself. I'm curious how you feel about at least when I first heard the news, my first thought immediately was, are they going to try and turn this into a comedy? Like I literally just came back from seeing the Dungeons and Dragons movie yesterday and walking out of that thinking like in a billion years, I never would have expected Dungeons and Dragons, the movie on the big screen, to just be a straight up like fantasy comedy. And that seems like the way that they could take Street Fighter hypothetically. You know, that's kind of what's happened in the past, kind of more camp adjacent. But now that we're in this, I think, world, as we were alluding to earlier, of studios starting to take game stories a little bit more seriously, I like your idea of focusing it deep on Ryu, who is kind of has this like Star Warsian struggle happening within him. You know, he is
Luke Skywalker, but he's got fists instead of lightsabers. You know,
kind of brought into a classic like shonen protagonist vibe.
I really I don't know if it's not as popular as many of the other many other Street Fighter like adaptations, but there's actually an animated series called Street Fighter 2 V, which I really, really love. And it's kind of takes the fundamentals of Street Fighter, and it is like a teenage Ryu, teenage Ken, and like it's just about their journey. And it's really, really good. And it takes all the characters that you know from the series and kind of weaves them into one overall plot where, you know, they're in a bar, Ryu and Ken, they've reunited, you know, Ken's dragged Ryu into a bar, and while they're there, like this army commander walks in and he's with his like army people, and then Ken and Ryu get a bit cocky and start a fight, and this dude named Guile absolutely wipes the floor with them, and then later on, you know, that kind of like sets someone a path to like kind of like figure out whether they're better, and you see him learn how to do the Hadouken for the first time ever. And it's just go to YouTube and just type in Street Fighter 2 V Hadouken, and it is this really beautiful, serene kind of scene where Ryu is standing on a beach in front of waves, and he's just doing kata. He's like just moving his hands gently, and as he's doing it lasts for a really long time. As he's doing it, you could just see like he's kind of like pulling energy out of the air, and then he slowly forms it into a Hadouken, and it is completely opposite to everything that you see in a game where you hit a button and it comes out instantly, or in Street Fighter to the animated movie where it's like this big bombastic moment. There's ways to interpret the kind of iconic parts of Street Fighter that can feel a little more nuanced or a little more interesting aesthetically, thematically, or even like, you know, in various other ways. So I really think that they've got a lot to work with. I really hope they don't just try and genreify it where it's like, here's a comedy film. I definitely think that you can have comedy. Like there are characters within that world that could exist, like a Dan, or, you know, to a degree, like, you know, Balrog in the live action movie. You know, the whole change the channel joke that happens in that is pretty still funny still. I think it's Balrog. It's either Balrog or Honda. I think it's Balrog that says that. But there are opportunities to have fun with it. But I hope that they don't do that. If I would like to hope, I know everyone's sick of like cinematic universes now, but I hope that there's a plan to really figure out, you know, how to make this movie not a one and done, but like build a kind of, I don't want to say universe, but like a kind of world around it, and a fiction around it, because there's so much to it. You can have these personal stories in the same way that you can have different corners of, you know, the Marvel universe colliding. If they wanted to do that, if I was being cynical and the pitch was we need something Marvel-esque, like you take one character at a time, tell the story, and eventually it ends in a Street Fighter tournament where they're all
phase
being,
one
you know,
vibes,
at the end. The end of each movie, you have the Ryu movie. At the end of each movie, he receives an envelope with the Shadow Lu logo on it, and it invites him to a tournament. And then the next movie is about a up and coming cop in China called Chun-li, and it's just her story, and it's a cop movie, you know. And then you can explore different genres and themes if you need to build that Marvel-esque universe to get the funds to do it.
Yeah, there are very few situations where I would be fully advocating for a giant cinematic universe, but I do think Street Fighter is one of those interesting ones, as you've mentioned, where each of those characters is coming from such a disparate place background-wise and emotional, thematic core-wise, that it almost would feel like a disservice to give each of those characters like 15 or 20 minutes of setup and then just have them fight for the last act. I think you're totally on the money there.
And the reason is, like, there is a level of fantastical and spiritual and magic and technology each of these characters has got something wild in it that
Yeah.
in a video game you put them together. A video game from the 90s, you don't bat an eyelid because all that stuff was wacky and weird, and because it's almost bedded in from that era, we don't really question it at this point. And for that stuff to work alongside each other, you really have to spend the time establishing it. You cannot have in one movie Ryu, who's this wandering world warrior who does karate, next to Yoga Man who can stretch, Blanca who's like wild man from jungle, and like, you know, boxing man, and then also Zangief. And it's just like, how do you bring these characters together? Like, you could put Q in there, or you're gonna do Sean, or who, like with basketballs, and it's kind of weird. Like, you can't have these all come together in one movie, and for people to just kind of it's going to be difficult to stomach it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas you give them their own movie, you can set the pace for it and set the tone.
Yeah. I would be very interested in that personally. Tam, thank you so much for hopping on and talking to me about this so last minute. But this is breaking news, baby. We got to talk about it on Wavelengths. I really appreciate you being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Love chatting to you.
Yeah. Where can people find you on the internet? Or where do you want people to find you on the internet?
You can find me...
Or do you not want them to?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm at Tamoor H on everything, like Twitter and Twitch. I stream there. And then my work is on that GameSpot and Giant Bomb and Kind of Funny. And usually if there's a gaming thing happening, I'm usually there in some capacity.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Want to give Tam a big shout out for being so generous with his time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for listening or watching wherever you happen to be doing either or both of those. If you're on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. It really helps. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a comment or review the show. That also really helps. Share it with a friend, etc. Have a good one.